Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. On August 26, 2014, Nintendo and the Pokémon Company announced their next major spin-off title would be made in collaboration with Namco Bandai. This wasn't massive news on its own. Namco already had a hand in the creation of the newest Super Smash Bros., so it made sense that the companies would continue their partnership on other projects. What was a surprise was that this new title would be a fighting game of all things, led by Tekken series producer Katsuhiro Harada and Soul Calibur producer Masaaki Hoshino. The objective was to create a 3D fighter, taking the mechanics of Tekken and the world of Pokémon and fuse them together in a sort of Pokken, if you will.
Say that again?
This title, officially called Pokken Tournament, initially launched in Japanese arcades in the summer of 2015, with a Wii U port the following year. This would be one of only 2 Pokémon games made for the Wii U, alongside the critically acclaimed phenomenon, Pokémon Rumble U. The arcade versions would continue to receive updates in the form of new characters, adding Darkrai, Scizor, Empoleon, and Croagunk to its roster. Many expected these Pokémon to become DLC for the Wii U version, but no DLC would come, despite these Pokémon's names appearing in the game's files following an update. Only about half a year later, in the summer of 2017, Nintendo announced Pokken Tournament DX for their latest system, the Nintendo Switch. This enhanced port included not only the 4 arcade-exclusive fighters, but also a brand new one, Decidueye, effectively making this the definitive version of the game, and the version we'll be looking at for this video. Did the game come together to create a real contender, or just a glass-jawed rookie? Let's now turn the page to Pokken Tournament. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ferrum region, where trainers of all kinds come together to compete in Ferrum battles with their Pokémon. Ferrum battles aren't your usual Pokémon fights. Rather than the usual turn-based affairs using type advantages to get the better of your adversary, Ferrum battles throw the type system out the window, instead having Pokémon fighting in knockdown, drag-out brawls, using every technique in their arsenal to punch, blast, and suplex their opponent into the dirt.
Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
We play as a new trainer on the block, eager to join the Ferrum League and become the Ferrum League champion. We are free to fully customize our trainer, from hair to clothes to even facial expressions. At the moment, the customization options are a bit limited, but as you play the game and participate in battles, you'll eventually have a titanic amount of customization choices to fit your style. Once we have our trainer looking the way we like, we meet up with Nina, a trainer who offers to show us the ropes when it comes to Ferrum battles. Nina takes the role of our advisor, providing advice and moral support throughout each battle. Do yourself a favor, go to the options and turn Nina's frequency of advice to off. Otherwise, she will pester you throughout the entire battle with advice that feels the equivalent of a sibling standing over your shoulder and backseat gaming by telling you what you should do. Her advice can be helpful if you're completely brand new to fighting games, as she'll give constant reminders to block or use your assist, but otherwise she's an annoyance. It doesn't help that her English voice acting is not particularly great. Pokken is one of the few Pokemon titles with proper voice acting, and the English actors were suddenly speaking into a microphone.
Are you both okay? I've never seen a Pokemon suddenly appear and attack like that. Just glad things didn't turn nasty.
Nina asks us to select our Pokemon, which will act as our partner throughout the Ferrum League. Don't worry, you're not forced to commit to a single Pokemon. You can change your partner anytime in the My Town area, so feel free to play around with the roster to find the Pokemon that best fits your playstyle. With our partner Pokemon chosen, we can now enter the league and participate in our first battle. But first, I'd like to talk about Pokken's roster. The quality of the roster is a difficult thing to evaluate. When Pokken first began development, there were over 700 different Pokemon, a number which has only grown since. Each person has their favorites, and it's impossible to please everyone when having to choose 23 for the main roster. I was fortunate enough to get two of my all-time favorites in the game, those being Caesar and Weavile, but I still couldn't help but feel a touch disappointed by the choice of fighters. Pokken's roster feels safe, selecting primarily fan favorites to appeal to as many people as possible. Some of these are perfect fits, like Lucario and Pikachu Libre, but then you have others like Charizard, Mewtwo, and Gengar, which are very boring picks. These are Pokemon that already get massive amounts of love and attention compared to the others, so seeing them chosen yet again instead of giving another Pokemon some time in the limelight is a letdown. That's not to say Pokken has no surprise pulls. Braixen and Chandelure were fun choices, and Suicune of all Pokemon being one of the few legendaries was quite the surprise. But did we really need two Pikachus and two Mewtwo's filling out the already very limited roster? Not to mention, some very obvious additions were clearly snubbed. It's criminal that Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan are reduced to only background cameos. And could we maybe have gotten Hawlucha instead of Pikachu Libre? I'm not even a massive fan of Hawlucha, but it's just such an obvious choice that's baffling they didn't make it in. Obviously, this is subjective, and your mileage with the roster will vary. I ultimately understand why the roster turned out as it did, but I would have preferred an interesting and unique roster over a safe one, even at the cost of my favorites. Though Pokken Tournament is a crossover with Tekken, it doesn't actually play like a Tekken game. Rather than being a purely 3D fighter, Pokken combines elements from both 2D and 3D fighters. During a battle, fights will switch between one of two phases, Field Phase and Duel Phase. The Field Phase takes place in 3D, and the player can freely move around the circular environment, similar to arena fighters like the Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi games or Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm series. Once the player grabs the opponent or lands a sufficiently powerful enough attack, a phase shift will trigger, and change the fight to the Duel Phase. Battles in the Duel Phase are now 2D, with up and down now being jump and crouch respectively. Just as before, if you land a grab or a strong enough attack, the fight will return to the Field Phase once more, and battles would continue to play out so on and so forth. Each Pokemon has a particular playstyle, which makes them better suited to a certain phase. For example, Darkrai has a bunch of trap moves and projectiles to keep opponents away, making them excel in the Field Phase. However, his options while in the Duel Phase are laughably poor, and he can quickly get overwhelmed. On the other hand, the likes of Garchomp has poor projectiles and performs terribly at long range. However, if they can get in close, especially in the Duel Phase, their combination of powerful attacks and mix-up options can make them a devastating threat. Understanding your Pokemon's strengths and weaknesses and controlling the phase of the battlefield to best take advantage of them is the key to success. This fighting system also has a sort of rock-paper-scissors-like mechanics mixed in. Fighters have three types of attacks: normal attacks, grab attacks, and counter attacks. Normal attacks are exactly as they sound, they're your standard moves. Counter attacks will have your Pokemon stop and charge for several seconds before unleashing a devastating counter. The fighter will be unaffected by normal attacks, but will instantly be stopped if they are grabbed. However, grab attacks won't work against opponents' normal attacks, and will guarantee a force palm to the face. Basically, normal attacks beat grabs, grabs beat counters, and counters beat normal attacks. The final two important mechanics of Pokken are supports and synergy bursts. At the beginning of each battle, the player can select one of several pairs of support Pokemon. You'll only be able to use one of these Pokemon at a time, with the option to change between the two in between rounds. Naturally, each support has its own unique ability when summoned, as well as a particular speed in which the support gauge fills up. Below this gauge is your Pokemon's synergy. You can earn synergy by attacking, being attacked, or from these rainbow-colored pickups during the field stage. Once it's full, your Pokemon can activate a synergy burst. While active, the affected Pokemon will have an increased attack and defense, and be able to use a burst attack, the most powerful technique in the fighter's arsenal. Burst attacks are flashy and cinematic, an absolute treat to watch. I also appreciate that none of them are too long, so even as I saw the same special animation over and over again, I never felt my eyes glaze over. The only problem with Synergy Burst is that in addition to the increase in attack strength, the user also gets super armor against normal attacks and some projectiles. Because of the massive threat this presents, with few options to effectively fight back, opponents are encouraged to run away and wait out the meter instead of battling, which is lame. Overall though, Pokken Tournament strikes a healthy middle ground between appealing to casual Pokemon fans and those wanting a deep fighter. It's not as technical as the likes of Tekken or Street Fighter, but it's not lacking in depth either. It provides a considerable amount for more advanced fighting game players to sink their teeth into. At the same time, it's not so complicated that it would prevent two players from just popping it in and mashing some buttons as their favorite Pokemon. Pokken Tournament is a very pretty game. The art style seems to be aimed at older fans, as instead of the simple, cartoon style from other 3D Pokemon games, Pokken uses more realistic textures to render the Pokemon. It's an art style that makes it stand out from other Pokemon games even now. The 3D arenas are also quite lovely to look at, providing a variety of locales with detailed backgrounds filled with trainers and Pokemon alike, making each stage lively. Just don't look too closely at the background Pokemon, or you'll notice just how awfully they're animated, if they're even animated at all. These don't matter that much since you'll be looking at the fight instead of the background, but during the intermissions, they become much easier to notice, and by Arceus they are distractingly ugly. Thankfully, the game makes up for it with the fighters, as each playable Pokemon's animations are injected with tons of personality. Empoleon is given a dignified and regal air, Machamp is the ideal male body and he knows it, and Weavile is a playful but mischievous little fella. Despite each fighter being just one of a species, they're given such distinct characters that the roster feels just as varied as any other fighting game cast, which is a remarkable feat. Once a battle is over, you earn experience points to raise your Pokemon's synergy level, which provides points to boost your Pokemon stats slightly. The benefits are minor, and thankfully most modes have the option to turn these stat boosts off for online and offline multiplayer, though good luck getting an online multiplayer match these days anyway. There is offline and local multiplayer if you're looking to play matches with a buddy. Local multiplayer is good and works as intended, but a word of warning for offline matches. Pokken's unique playstyle can make things less than ideal. Offline multiplayer doesn't use split screen, and as such, one player will have to awkwardly control their Pokemon on the opposite, farther side of the arena in field mode, instead of over the shoulder as intended. This wasn't an issue on Wii U, since one player could look at the TV while the other looked at the gamepad, providing both players with the proper perspective. Since the Switch has no gamepad, one unlucky player will be stuck with the position usually reserved for computer opponents, and essentially deal with backwards controls during the field phase. The Ferrum League is Pokken's primary single-player experience, so let's pick up where we left off. As a newbie to the Ferrum League, we start in the Green League. Initially, only league matches are available, which require us to play 5 matches against random trainers. Once these 5 matches are complete, we'll move up in the league ranking based on how many wins we receive. After doing this a few times and getting our rank within the top 8, we'll have earned the right to participate in the league tournament. It's a standard bracketed tournament in which we'll have to beat several opponents without losing. If we succeed, we'll be able to challenge the league champion in the promotion test. The Green League champion is Travis and his partner Pokemon Garchomp. Being the first champion, Travis isn't too tough, making him an easy victory. As we're celebrating our promotion to the Blue League, a mysterious woman in a hood appears, and a black-colored Mewtwo suddenly attacks us. Mewtwo changes the arena into a dark rift and forces a fight. Mewtwo is significantly harder than the previous opponents we faced, and you'll very likely get pelted into the dirt. This fight is technically winnable, but you're meant to lose, and the game acts like you did regardless of the outcome. After sufficiently giving us a good spanking, Mewtwo refuses to elaborate and leaves, leaving us wondering what the hell just happened. We also learn of Nina's horrific intolerance, as she comments that the black Mewtwo we fought was the wrong color.
It wasn't the right color.
Disgusting. At least we managed to unlock the next league, and the process remains the same as before, though the number of trainers we need to fight to get into the top 8 has risen quite a bit, and will only continue to increase as we reach later leagues. The Ferrum League feels bloated with league matches, requiring dozens of matches to reach the tournament of each rank, and it can make playing through the single player feel like a slog. Pokken is a fighting game, so admittedly there's not a whole lot else that could have been done to change this up, but stuffing in more regular battles just to pad out the content isn't exactly thrilling either. If you're playing the Wii U version, there's content that can only be unlocked by clearing all the leagues too, so this padding just makes getting that content all the more tedious. After working through the Blue League, we reach the champion Keith, whose partner Pokemon is a Suicune. The guy has a legendary Pokemon as his partner, but is the second lowest champion in Ferrum. Methinks you might be holding your partner back a bit, Keith. We stomp him and are promoted to the Red League, but just as before, the Hooded Girl and Shadow Mewtwo show up to crash the party. Mewtwo is still too much for us, and pieces out without explanation once more, though thankfully Nina manages to keep her bigoted comments to herself. Still without any clue what's going on, we battle through the Red League, which is otherwise identical to previous leagues, but now we have even more league matches to fight through. Yay! We beat the champion Alin, which means once again Shadow Mewtwo appears wanting to throw hands. By this point though, our synergy with our partner Pokemon has grown enough that we're more than a match for Shadow Mewtwo, who apologizes and tells us to have a nice day before leaving. The Hooded Girl approaches us and says her name is Anne. She explains that Mewtwo protected her from something known as the Dark Synergy Stone, the yellow crystal embedded in its shoulder. The Dark Synergy Stone has been slowly corrupting Mewtwo, while draining the life, or Gaia, from Ferrum. The only way to purify Shadow Mewtwo and save Ferrum is with Anne's Synergy Stone, but the stone is currently lacking power. The only way to restore it is by fighting powerful opponents. Here, we actually get 3 unique story battles in what I consider to easily be the coolest stages in the game. These battles have unique restrictions placed on us, such as being unable to use support Pokemon or having no synergy gauge. These fights really tested me, and it beat having to do the same league matches over and over, so honestly I wouldn't have minded if the story mode had a few more unique battles like this. We win 3 battles and are 1 fight away from fully charging the Synergy Stone. However, we run out of time, and if we don't fight and defeat Shadow Mewtwo now, it'll be too late. We track Shadow Mewtwo down, where its power has grown so much that it has entered a permanent state of Mega Evolution, and the rift it creates has begun to expand. This is the final battle of the story, and easily the toughest challenge in Pokken, at least for the first round. Shadow Mewtwo's health is like triple that of any other Pokemon in the game, and it's permanently in Synergy Burst for the entire fight. Despite the battle saying it's out of 3, the match ends if you lose the first round. This is because the fight is somewhat scripted, and you're forced to lose round 2, no matter how well you perform. In the 3rd and final round, Anne will use the Synergy Stone to give the player a permanent Synergy Burst, and even the playing field. I admit I did get pretty pumped having a battle with both Pokemon at full power, and again this would have been a terrific way of giving variety by having a few more battles like this scattered over the Ferrum League. In any event, we deal the finishing blow to Shadow Mewtwo, and manage to restore them back to normal, saving Ferrum. If you're playing the Wii U version, completing this battle will unlock Mewtwo as a playable character, while the Switch version has the entire roster available from the start. Anne thanks us for our help, while Nina learns not to judge Pokemon by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, concluding Pokken's story. That's pretty much the bulk of Pokken's unique single-player content. There are 2 more leagues the player can fight through, which unlocks Shadow Mewtwo as a playable character in the Wii U version, but it doesn't really have any extra story content, and consists of the same league matches and tournaments we've all become accustomed to. As someone who loves playing fighting games single-player, I appreciate Pokken having a dedicated single-player mode, and I definitely got my mileage out of playing through the various leagues. But there's also no denying that Pokken's story feels very tacked on. There honestly barely is an actual story, and what little is there offers nothing in terms of interesting characters or developing the Ferrum region as anything other than one big fighting arena. The real sore spot is how much it's padded out with league matches, which become insanely repetitive. They could have softened the blow by including more special conditions to battles, but I can count the number of unique fights the story had on one hand. If you're just looking to play Pokken solo for a bit, the Pherom League is fine, but nothing there is exciting enough to entice the multiplayer-focused crowd to give it a look either. As far as first attempts in a new genre go, Pokken is a pretty good fighter. There's enough appeal for casual fans to mess around and have a pretty good time with, while still having advanced techniques to attract veteran fighting game players, though it may not be enough to hold their attention for long. Trainer customization is great with a bunch of unlockables, and though the single player mode is repetitive, it also gives solo players enough to do for a good while. Pokken Tournament will take the number 24 spot, evolving beyond Ultimate Spider-Man for the Game Boy Advance. I think with a more meaningful story, Pokken could have pushed itself higher, but it's still a solid fighter I can easily see myself going back to for a handful of bouts with my favorite Pokemon. There's enough potential here for a sequel that I can only hope Nintendo follows up on one day. Pokemon in all-out brawls is just too good a fit to leave at one game. And that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that like button and maybe sharing the video with your friends. What Pokemon did you main in Pokken? And if there were to ever be a Pokken 2, what Pokemon would you like to see added to the roster? I would love to see Zoroark. Its shapeshifting abilities can make it like a Shang Tsung type, changing between several other Pokemon throughout the battle and during combos. Let me know your choice down in the comments. It would be cool to hear everyone's ideas. In the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.